Thank you, Deputy Chief Farisi. Thank you so much. Pleased to be joined by the Executive Director of HIDA as well. And thank you all for being here. I have to thank the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department for organizing this briefing and for everything they're doing really to keep our community safe. We are here today because we have a drug problem in this country, and it's going to take all of us working together to really focus on how we address it. The drug, as many know already, drugs like fentanyl are a danger to our communities, our neighborhoods, our first responders in Las Vegas and throughout our state. We've seen this happen before with methamphetamines. We were just talking. The meth crisis was and still is a big reason why I continue this work. When I was Attorney General, that's where it started for me, working with our law enforcement on really cracking down on methamphetamine and working closely with our law enforcement to go after those meth manufacturers and limit the sale of the chemicals that are used as those precursor drugs. But you know, our police are still working hard to hold meth manufacturers and traffickers accountable. Unfortunately, in recent years, we've been seeing fentanyl take a similar trajectory as meth. It's compounding the challenges that we've had with meth, and is adding to really the devastation that we are seeing in our communities. That's why I have been working with Metro and agencies across Nevada to get our law enforcement the resources that they need and will continue to need to really crack down on the flow of fentanyl into our neighborhoods. That starts at the very top. We really have to go after traffickers and producers at the source. And that means following the money. I just passed bipartisan legislation in the Senate to create stronger sanctions for people trafficking and manufacturing fentanyl, which would go directly after that supply chain. This bill will also provide our police with better tools to stop these deadly drugs from getting into our communities in the first place. Let me just say that again. This was bipartisan work. The Fend Off Fentanyl Act we just passed through the Defense Authorization Act. And it is necessary that we continue to work in a bipartisan way to really not only give law enforcement the tools, but follow the money and follow where it takes us to that supply chain to go after the source of it. But you know, our work is far from over. Earlier this year, I had been hearing about this from our law enforcement. We were starting to see xylazine making its way across the country into many communities, and some of it here in Nevada. If you don't know, xylazine is an animal tranquilizer. It's an animal tranquilizer that drug traffickers have been adding to fentanyl to increase the potency of the drug and to boost their profits. Now, clearly, we have to get it ahead of this issue, and right now, because it is an animal tranquilizer that veterinarians use for a legitimate purpose, it is not illegal for it to be used illicitly. So that's the purpose of this legislation, really to give law enforcement the tools that they need to go after those traffickers, to go after the manufacturers, to go after whoever wants to turn it into illicit purposes for profit. Among the issues that we know are the fact that xylazine isn't a scheduled drug, and that's the reason why in my legislation we have scheduled it similar to a Schedule 3 that makes it illegal to divert it for illicit purposes, but we also recognize it still needs to be used for a legitimate purpose for our veterinarians. So that's what the legislation does. If you're going to divert it for illicit purposes, law enforcement now has the tools across the country to go after those individuals, those traffickers. Again, I can't stress this enough. Xylazine is just one of many ways that these large-scale criminal organizations are going to try to profit off of Americans here, people in the United States, for illicit purposes for drugs. And if we don't stay together, if we don't stand together at a federal, state, and local level working to address this, to keep our communities safe, we're going to have one too many that we're going to lose in our communities. One is way too many already. We see it time and again. And that's why it is important that we get ahead of it, and that's why this legislation, this bipartisan legislation that I've introduced with respect to xylazine, is crucial that we pass it and make sure that we continue to work at all levels to support our communities and ensure that our families, individuals, know that we are looking out for the best interests to keep our community safe. So I thank Metro a lot. I thank so many in our community that are on the forefront of this fight. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here today as well with all of you. Thank you.
So good afternoon. I'm Nick Farisi. I'm the Deputy Chief of the Investigative Service Division for the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department. I want to start by thanking Senator Cortez Masto and her staff for coming together today to hold this press conference, and to the members of the media who assist us in sharing this public safety message with the community. As of August of this year, the Clark County Coroner's Office reported 450 overdose deaths within our county. 50% of those involved the illicit drug fentanyl. Our agency adopted new training to educate our officers to identify the signs of a potential overdose and the effective use of Narcan, which has been a crucial tool to assist in life-saving measures when dealing with an overdose victim. As the Senator mentioned, we have seen a new drug surface across the nation known as xylazine, also known as tranq on the street. What we know is that xylazine is a non-opiate sedative most commonly used with veterinarians. It has been found in street drugs as a cutting agent with fentanyl and other narcotics. Xylazine does not have an approved use for humans and is incredibly dangerous, causing depressed breathing and heart rate, unconsciousness, and unfortunately even death. Unlike fentanyl, xylazine does not have an approved antidote like Narcan. This means that if you or a loved one overdose with fentanyl or any opioid that has xylazine in it, Narcan will likely not be effective. Since 2020, 4 people have died from an overdose where xylazine was determined to play a role in the cause of their death. While the number of our cases involving xylazine remain low, we want to create awareness around this dangerous drug before it makes its way into our community the way that fentanyl did in prior years. In 2020, we saw a 30% increase in fentanyl-related deaths across the valley, and our citizens demanded a call for action. Our narcotics crime section and units like our overdose response team, which was established in 2020, continue to develop investigative leads to identify drug sellers and traffickers and reduce fatal and non-fatal overdose deaths within our community. This year, our narcotics section has seized approximately 136 pounds of fentanyl. That's 136 pounds of fentanyl. Although a small number in comparison to the big picture, each pill we removed off the streets could be a life saved. And just remember just how little fentanyl you need to ingest for it to be deadly. We must remember fentanyl is often disguised as a prescription pill, which can be 50 times more potent than heroin. You can only imagine how much deadlier the ingestion of these drugs can be if xylazine is incorporated into the mixture. We are asking our community to please do your part and keep in mind the following safety tips. Never purchase a prescription medication on the streets or social media, as it could contain lethal doses of fentanyl or xylazine. Only consume medication prescribed to you by a licensed physician and obtained through a legitimate pharmacy. If you or someone you know suffers from substance abuse, please seek help. Before it's too late. There are multiple resources available. If you need to know some resources available to you, please visit our website at www.lvmpd.com. On that website, you'll click on helpful links, and there will be a drop down to LVMPD resources and a brochure that provides avenues to seek help. Do not allow someone you know or yourself to fall victim to these drugs. This is 100% preventable. If you know someone who is selling or manufacturing illegal narcotics and you wish to remain anonymous, I remind you to please call us at Crime Stoppers at 702-385-5555. Again, you can remain completely anonymous in reporting illicit activity involving narcotics. On behalf of Sheriff McMahill and all of us at the LVMPD, we would like to thank Senator Cortez Masto for all of her legislative efforts and supporting us in the ongoing fight against illicit narcotics. I thank you all for your time and hope that together we can make a difference in making Las Vegas the safest community in America. Thank you. Now I'd like to open it up just for a few questions.
Are you finding that the xylazine is coming from vet's office, or is it being produced in some way somewhere?
Right now, we're seeing a little bit of both. I mean, most of our illegal narcotics, especially dealing with fentanyl, is coming south of the border with drug trafficking organizations and cartels. How they're getting that and how they're manufacturing it, I can't speak on right now, but the one legal use is through veterinarians.
Nick, just to be clear, you are now saying that you have seen, that Metro has seen xylazine in some of the seizures that you've been able to make?
Yes. While small in numbers, our fear is that that's going to grow just like fentanyl did. And if you remember, in the mid to late 90s, we saw a spike with illegal drugs with ketamine, also known as Special K, out on the street.
When did the xylazine first show up?
We started seeing that in late 2020, early 2021, and it's little by little, it's starting to creep into communities across America.
What does it look like? I mean, is it pill form? Is it broken down into particles?
Yeah, we're seeing it pressed into pills, and like I said, they're blending. You know, they'll pretend to sell a pain pill, and they'll cut it with fentanyl, and they'll cut it with xylazine.
Are you working with any of the veterinarians to see if they can put a lockdown on this, or to see if they get requests in? Is there, like, until the legislation is done, any efforts to try to curb the amount getting out?
Well, that's part of what this campaign is, and like the senator said, right now it's not illegal. So that's the challenge. So right now it's about bringing awareness to our community and educating our community, and especially parents. You know, that's our first line of defense, because we see that our youth wants to turn to pills sometimes because they're easier and readily available. I have time for one more question.
For Senator Cortez Masto, when we talked about this back in May, you had mentioned that part of an element of this bill, the fentanyl bill, was to make sure that resources were available to keep this from coming over the border. Is in the approved form now, that's been voted on, are you comfortable that that funding is there?
So the xylazine bill has a couple of things in it. One is to make it illegal to divert the xylazine for illicit purposes, but still legal for our veterinarians who use it for large animals, right? So like the Cattlemen's Association in this state was instrumental in helping us draft this legislation, because it is important that our veterinarians for large animals still have access to this tranquilizer. And so that is part of this. The other piece of this legislation is to give the DEA tools they need to track this drug, how it's being diverted. So my understanding is a lot of the xylazine is coming from Mexico and coming into Mexico from other countries. The legislation itself gives DEA the tools that they need to track it and track it outside of this country to find the source of that supply chain as well with respect to xylazine. But it is important that we also understand there's a legitimate purpose for it, and that's why not only the Cattlemen's Association here in Nevada, but across the country, the National Association have been instrumental in working with us on this legislation, along with the DEA and the Department of Justice.
Thank you very much.